This is the Ford Mustang MachE GT, and if that name makes you cringe, don't worry, they put a V8 under the hood, or we did. But what we're going to do today is break down whether this car deserves to bear the name, and if it's generally a good EV. Let's hop in. When I think of Mustang GT, I think of things in this order. 1, sound. No, not really. And then the other thing I think of is speed. Yeah, that'll do it. There it is. This thing is brutally fast. This is the most powerful Mustang GT in Ford's lineup currently, with 480 horsepower and 600 pound-feet of torque, going to a front and rear motor for all-wheel drive traction. However, this is the performance pack, which is another $5,000, but you do get another 34 pound-feet of torque, along with some other things we'll talk about later. This MachE GT does bear the Mustang name and carries with it all of the heritage and the pedigree that comes with that. So when they were designing it, of course, they kept the Mustang in mind. However, this car, when they benchmarked it in development, they had a different target, and that was the Tesla Model Y, performance specifically. And rightfully so. Tesla is a brand synonymous with EVs, so if you want to rise to the top of a segment, to the top of the class, that's your target. And Ford did a great job here. The MachE GT packs significantly more power than a Tesla Model Y performance, but it does fall short to the Tesla in an important place. The GT here uses an 88 kilowatt hour battery pack, and Ford claims a range of 270 miles. However, I plugged it in at my house, charged it up all the way, taking it off the charger, 100% came back at 240 miles. Sure, this could be a result of the driving style or the harsh life that these press cars live, but that's the least range in the entire MachE lineup, and it's quite a bit less than the 303 you'll get in the Tesla. And then of course there's the public charging infrastructure to talk about, and I'll put it this way without getting into it too much. The Tesla supercharger network is still the best. But the reality is 90% of the time, most people will be plugging in at home and letting it charge overnight. So you have to decide if that matters to you. It's not to say you can't charge away from your home in the MachE, but just be aware of broken chargers, slow charging times, and an overall unpredictable nature of things. But this is a Mustang, and it says GT on the back, so how does this thing drive when you're on it? Well, as I've said, it's fast as hell. 0 to 60 is done in a reported 3.5 seconds. I don't have my own independent testing equipment, but it seems about right. Now, that's really not bad for the 5,000 pound curb weight that this thing is packing, but the weight is really more of a concern under braking and under cornering. Braking for a corner is when I'm most aware of the weight. The 15-inch Brembos up front and the 12 inches in the back, they do a good job. They bite hard. However, I did notice under a really intense braking event that I did, after that, the brakes did chatter a little bit. Now, I drove a few more miles and just did some lighter braking, and eventually it smoothed itself out, but just something to be aware of if you plan to drive this thing aggressively, if you would ever autocross it or track it. I don't know who's doing that, but maybe. But then there's turn-in, and the steering is really fast. And in unbridled mode, you have a really nice feeling heft to it. You don't get a lot of feedback from what the front tires are doing, but you do have a lot of good front-end bite from these Pirelli PZero tires up front. And then around mid-corner, the tires are hanging on, the suspension, it's got mag ride, does a fantastic job at keeping the car neutral. The batteries are in the floor, so the center of gravity is really low, and the chassis doesn't flex at all. It is a very composed, probably more so than it should be, really good mid-corner. And then of course, as you start to roll on the power, you have to be careful because you have 634 pound-feet of torque at your disposal, and it's on in a snap. So if you stab at the throttle, you will get this thing to step out. You will get a bunch of wheel spin. This thing will go sideways on you. So just be aware. You can go into unbridled extend, which is labeled for track use only, and that really cuts a lot of your traction and stability control. So you can get this thing out of shape if you really want to. One thing that helps is the mag ride damping, which keeps the car so neutral through a corner at speed. You do have a strut front suspension and a multi-link, so the front end will push a little around mid-corner if you ask too much of it or get on the power. However, during normal driving, the car does remind you of its weight by seemingly thudding over bumps. Under normal relaxed driving conditions, the normal MachE, I would say, has a better ride. But that's true of really any performance version of a car. So yeah, under normal driving circumstances, there are some compromises that you'll make here, but the car is still really smooth, it's easy to drive, and it's got a really refined feeling to it. You do have good visibility, although the wing mirrors are kind of a weird shape and feel kind of small. They're a little weird to look out of, but it's maybe a personal thing on my end. They don't actually affect the visibility that much. But no, I mean, as an EV, as a car, as an appliance to get you from one place to the next, it's great because it's fun when you want it to be, it's really exciting when you want it to be, and it's also really relaxed when you need it to be. Okay, so as you can see, this thing makes plenty of power. However, there's something that I didn't mention behind the wheel. It makes plenty of power, it comes on really quick and really sharp, and that's something that you would expect from an EV, especially a performance-oriented one. However, it's when you come off the power that it does something a little bit weird. In certain drive modes and unbridled, when you're really on it, like if you've floored the throttle, and then you come off, there's like a fraction of a second between when you let off power and when the car actually stops accelerating. So you kind of have the sensation that when you come off, it doesn't stop going right away, which is a little bit odd, it's a little bit unsettling, but it's ultimately not something that really affects the driving experience unless you're coming right up behind somebody. So if you're a really aggressive driver and you get on everyone's ass, maybe be aware of that. But anyway, let's talk about the way that this thing looks. It's in the red, like we had the other one, but it looks spectacular, especially with the polarized light. So much metal flake and dimension, especially in this creased hood. It's very much the same as the normal MACH-E. However, they have made some small but important changes to the look of this thing. Now, this GT looks so much better, in my opinion, than the normal MACH-E. And it's, again, very simple stuff. You've got this kind of dimensional placard here in your front grille. This horse lights up, which is, I guess, kind of interesting. It's very Mercedes-esque. You've got a more aggressive rear splitter up here that's black. You've got more aggressive front valence with your air curtains bringing air around to the side of these, guess what? Body colored wheel arches, very nice, not the black stuff that we saw on the normal MACH-E, but then you've got these big 20-inch wheels, and these are specific to the actual performance pack. The base GT gets the Flower Power wheels. I kind of like the Flower Power wheels, but I like these more. So you've got that, you've got your 15-inch Brembo brakes up here, but then the profile is largely the same. You've got black accenting down here on your rocker panel, black window treatments, black side view mirror. This thing is like a the side mirror looks kind of weird. It looks almost too small, but you know, that's probably for aerodynamic reasons. Again, on the side you have your very similar push button door panels with the little handle that we've talked about a number of times. Black roof treatments with your sloping and tapering roof, and then your flared rear hip. You do have, I forgot to mention because it's not on the side, on the left-hand side, on the driver's side, you do have your charging panel right here on the front fender, which is fantastic for me in my application because, as I said in my case study, I always pull into my driveway forward. My charger is on the back wall of the garage. It's perfectly easy to plug in there rather than on the back here like you get in some EVs. On the back, it's incredibly familiar to the normal Mustang Mach-E. I think even the rear, I guess if you call that a spoiler, is about the same. It's black. The only difference that I can really tell from the back is that instead of a Mustang badge back here, you have a GT badge for your center trunk. And then maybe your black rear diffuser has a little bit more embellishment, but that's about it. So again, subtle changes, but they go a long way, especially on the front end. But let's step inside. Okay, and then the interior. It's almost identical to the regular Mach-E. The biggest difference is the seats. People rave about these seats online. To me, they're kind of okay. They're very comfortable, don't get me wrong, but as someone with big, broad man shoulders, I am aware of almost a little pinching. And then when I do rock back and forth, I mean, you can hear it squeaking a little bit. So it's not perfect. It's still a very good seat, but it's not perfect. The design, though, from the dash and everything else, again, is almost identical. It's simple, it's minimal. You've got an actual physical gauge cluster, which I really, really like. It's got all the same information. You, interestingly, don't have a head-up display. I thought that was something that they were going to bring to the GT, but you still don't have that. You got your typical eyeball watcher behind the steering wheel. The steering wheel is exactly the same. They even have the Mustang in the middle and not the GT. But then on the steering wheel, you do have things to control your 360 CoPilot or your Blue Cruise or whatever Ford calls it these days, but it's a fantastic system. Again, we've got a huge amount of construction around my house. This thing didn't skip a beat, changing lanes, changing traffic patterns, you know, adapting speed. It was very, very good. I liked it a lot. And then of course, the main event on the interior is your big 15.5-inch center screen. This was in the normal MACH-E, this was in the Lightning that we tested recently. You have 360 camera in here, which is very good. You don't have a cooled seat, which I think is interesting. You've got heated, then you've got heated steering wheel, but you don't have a cooled seat. So no head-up display, no cooled seat, which I think is interesting on this. But all of your climate controls are always down here at the bottom of your screen, so it's really easy to use. And you do have wireless CarPlay here as well. One of the weirder features that continues in the MACH-E is the fact that you do have this big Pano roof, this big glass roof, which is I think just over $1,000 extra, but it doesn't have a shade. It doesn't have like the electrochromic kind of like UV filtering either. It is UV filtered, so you're not going to get burned in here, and it doesn't make the cabin like really hot either, but it is kind of interesting that they don't give you an option to be able to close that or, you know, block the sun off entirely. But in terms of your back seat, they're incredibly roomy like they have been in the normal ones. You don't have map pockets with these performance seats though, just something to be aware of. And then in your trunk, it's a nice usable size trunk. It actually feels a little bit bigger than the Ioniq 5, so that's pretty impressive. But overall, the interior, it's a nice mix of materials. The build quality is pretty solid. You do have some gloss plastic and some cheaper stuff, but generally there's a nice use of differing materials, some suede, some Alcantara, some cloth, that, you know, kind of B&O soundbar-esque thing across your dash. It has a nice refined and quiet and upscale feeling. So with that, I think it's probably a good time to get into the final thoughts. So after a week with the MACH-E, and keeping in mind that the as-tested price is 70 grand, I think I would still go with the Ioniq 5. The MACH-E is very fast and it's very good, but the $70,000 is a lot of money. And the normal MACH-E and other EVs are still plenty quick. I guess at the end of the day, the MACH-E GT is a lot of fun, but doesn't feel special enough over the normal one to justify the price hike, which might say more about how good the regular MACH-E is, rather than being a diss on the GT. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.